They treated me like a breathing ATM, valuable only when signing checks. I funded my mother's lavish Charleston birthday, but 3 days before the event, they banned me to appease the ex-fiancé who betrayed me. I didn't scream, I simply hung up, opened my laptop, and hit cancel. They forgot a basic rule of capitalism when the investor withdraws. The project collapses. By canceling the checks, I didn't just ruin a party. I detonated 20 years of dark family secrets. My name is Isabel Merriweather. I am 29 years old, and on paper, I am the definition of an American success story. As the creative director at Ethelgard Systems, a tech firm that specializes in things most people use but do not understand, I command a salary that puts me in the top 1% of earners for my age bracket. I have a loft in downtown Charleston with exposed brick walls that cost more to restore than my parents' entire house is worth. I drive a German car that smells like expensive leather and quiet achievement. I have a credit score that opens doors before I even knock. Yet, as I sat in my home office on a Tuesday evening, surrounded by swatches of silk and samples of letterpressed cardstock, I felt less like a successful executive and more like a desperate child trying to buy a seat at the cool kids' table. Only the cool kids were my parents, and the admission fee was $50,000. That was the price tag for my mother's 60th birthday party. $50,000. I say the number out loud sometimes just to feel the weight of it on my tongue. It is a down payment on a house. It is 4 years of tuition at a state university. But to Patricia and Thomas Merriweather, it was merely the requisite amount to prove to their country club friends that they were still relevant, still prosperous, and still the envy of the neighborhood. The only problem was that they did not have $50,000. They had me. For the last 6 months, my life had revolved around this singular event. My mother, Patricia, had decided that 60 was the new 40, and she wanted a celebration that would rival a royal coronation. She wanted it at the Grand Oak Manor, an exclusive private resort on the coast that required a membership we did not have and a deposit that made my accountant weep. I made it happen. I pulled strings. I called in favors from clients who knew the owners. I paid the $15,000 non-refundable deposit without blinking, transferring the funds to what my father claimed was the venue's holding account. I curated every detail. I chose the linens, a specific shade of dusty rose that my mother insisted was the only color that complemented her skin tone. I hired a jazz quartet that usually only played for senators' fundraisers. I imported orchids from Hawaii because the local florists could not guarantee the specific petal count my mother demanded. I created a spreadsheet with 20 tabs, tracking dietary restrictions, seating charts, and gift bag contents. I did all of this while managing a team of 40 designers at Ethelgard, sleeping 4 hours a night, and existing on espresso in the pathetic hope that, perhaps, if this party was perfect, my mother would look at me and see something other than a bank draft. Then there was Lucas, my older brother, the golden boy, the prodigal son who returned home every 2 years with a new failure and an empty suitcase. Lucas was 32, unemployed, and currently finding himself after a disastrous attempt to launch a luxury surfboard brand in landlocked Colorado. He had been back at my parents' house for 3 weeks, sleeping in his childhood bedroom, eating the groceries I paid for, and driving the SUV I leased for my father. When I visited last Sunday to drop off the final check for the caterers, Lucas was sprawled on the couch, watching daytime television while my mother made him a sandwich. She looked at him with a tenderness she had never shown me, not even when I was valedictorian, not even when I got promoted, to them. Lucas was a victim of a cruel world that didn't understand his genius. I was just Isabel. Reliable, boring, solvent. Isabel. The call came 3 days before the party. It was 6 o'clock in the evening. I was still at my office, reviewing the final lighting schematics for the ballroom, when my phone rang and I saw my father's name, Thomas, flashing on the screen. I smiled. I genuinely smiled. I thought he was calling to thank me. Perhaps he was calling to tell me how excited Mom was, or to ask if I needed help transporting the 300 customized favors I had spent my weekend assembling. "Hello, Dad," I said. putting on my headset so I could keep typing. I just got confirmation from the sommelier. He managed to secure the 21 vintage bottles Mom wanted. There was a silence on the other end. It was not a comfortable silence. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a man who has been ordered to do something he knows is wrong but lacks the spine to refuse. "Isabel," he said, his voice tight. "We need to talk about the guest list." I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "The guest list is finalized. Dad, the RSVPs were due 2 weeks ago. The seating chart is already at the printers. Unless someone died, we can't change it." "It's not about adding anyone," he said, clearing his throat. "It is about removals." A cold prickle of unease ran down my spine. "Who isn't coming?" "You," he said. The word hung in the air, heavy and absurd. I actually laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Excuse me. The connection must be bad. I thought you said me." "Listen, Isabel, try to understand." My father rushed on, his voice gaining a frantic edge now that the bomb had been dropped. "We had a last-minute RSVP from the Hendersons. You know the Hendersons, big real estate developers from Atlanta. They are thinking of investing in your brother's new venture. It is a huge opportunity for Lucas. It could finally be the big break he needs." I stared at the glowing monitor of my computer. "Okay, what does that have to do with me?" "Well," my father hesitated. "They are bringing their son and their son's wife." I closed my eyes. I knew what was coming before he said it. The Hendersons. The name hadn't registered immediately, but now it hit me like a physical blow. The Hendersons were Preston's parents. Preston, the man I was engaged to last year. Preston, the man who had cheated on me with his spinning instructor 2 months before our wedding, leaving me with a non-refundable deposit on a venue and a heart that felt like it had been put through a shredder. My parents knew this. They had watched me cry on their floor. They had watched me lose 15 pounds in a month. "Preston is coming," I said, my voice flat. "Yes," my father said, "and he is bringing his new wife, the instructor." "And you invited them?" "We didn't invite them specifically. Isabel, we invited his parents for business for Lucas. They just happened to say they were bringing the kids. We can't tell them no. They are very important people." "So tell me not to come," I whispered. "You are banning me from the party I paid for because my cheating ex-fiancé is coming with the woman he left me for." "We are not banning you," my father said, though that was exactly what he was doing. "We are just protecting you. We know how emotional you get. We don't want a scene. Imagine how awkward it would be for the Hendersons if you started crying or made a snide comment. It would ruin the atmosphere. It would ruin Lucas's chances. I am 29 years old. Dad, I run a company. I think I can handle seeing Preston without throwing a tantrum. You say that. But you are dramatic. Isabel, you always have been." "I paid for this party," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "I paid $50,000. Every fork, every napkin, every glass of wine they are going to drink is on my dime, and you are telling me I can't be there." There was a shuffling sound on the other end, and then my mother's voice cut through the line. She must have been listening the whole time. "Stop manipulating your father. Isabel," Patricia snapped. Her voice was sharp, the tone she used when I was a teenager and didn't clean my room to her standards. "This is exactly why you can't come. You are already raising your voice. You are already making this about you. It is my birthday. Can't you for once in your life put someone else's needs before your own ego?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "My ego, Mom. I bought you a $50,000 party. I did everything." "You did it because you like to show off," she countered. "You like to wave your money around to make your brother feel small. If you really loved me, if you really wanted me to have a happy birthday, you would step aside gracefully. You would want Lucas to have this connection. But no, you want to be there to glare at Preston and make everyone uncomfortable with your tragic victim act." "I am not the victim," I said, gripping the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turned white. "I am the financier." "Don't be vulgar," she hissed. "We are family. Family helps each other without keeping a scorecard. Look, this isn't up for debate. We have told security at the gate that you are not on the list. If you show up, they will turn you away, and that will be embarrassing for everyone. Just stay in your fancy apartment, order some takeout, and we will send you pictures. Oh, and Isabel. What? I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Hollow, mechanical. Did you make the final transfer to the catering company? The manager called yesterday saying it was pending. I stared at the wall. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of narcissism. They were uninviting me, insulating their golden child, prioritizing the man who broke my heart, and in the same breath, checking to make sure my check cleared. Isabel, she asked again, impatient. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It wasn't a breakdown. It was the sound of a heavy steel door slamming shut and locking automatically. It was the sound of affection dying. For years, I had thought that if I just paid enough, if I just achieved enough, if I was just perfect enough, they would love me as much as they loved Lucas. I realized in that moment, with perfect, crystalline clarity, that it was impossible. I was not their daughter. I was their sponsor. I was a resource to be mined until I was empty. They didn't want me. They wanted my utility. Yes, I said. My voice was incredibly calm. It frightened me a little. I see your point. Mom, you are right. My presence would be a distraction. I shouldn't ruin your big night. My mother let out a sigh of relief. Thank goodness. I knew you would be reasonable eventually. We will tell everyone you came down with the flu. It is better that way. And the catering payment, she pressed. I will handle everything, I said. Don't worry about a single penny. Enjoy the party. Thank you, sweetie. We will call you on Sunday. The line went dead. I sat there in the silence of my office for a long time. The cleaning crew came in, saw me staring at my dark screen, and quietly backed out. I looked at the binder on my desk. Patricia's 60th Jubilee. It was thick with contracts, receipts, and email chains. I looked at the photo of my family I kept on my desk, my parents standing with Lucas, all of them beaming. I was the one taking the picture. I stood up, picked up my bag, and drove home. I didn't cry. I didn't scream in the car. I listened to a podcast about market volatility. When I got to my apartment, I poured myself a glass of water, not wine. I needed a clear head. I sat down at my personal laptop, the machine where I managed my personal finances. I opened the spreadsheet titled Birthday Expenses, $50,000, total projected cost, $35,000 paid to date, $15,000 pending. I looked at the list of vendors, the caterer, the florist, the band, the lighting technicians, the valet service, the custom cake designer who was charging $800 for sugar flowers. All of them had contracts with me, not with Patricia Merriweather, not with Thomas Merriweather, with Isabel Merriweather. My mother was right about one thing. Capitalism does not care about feelings. It cares about contracts. It cares about who holds the pen. They had forgotten the most fundamental rule of the business world they pretended to be part of: never fire the person who signs the checks before the project is delivered. They wanted to cut me out. They wanted to treat me like a silent partner who could be silenced at will. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. I navigated to the email folder marked Vendors. I opened a new draft. I didn't write a long, emotional diatribe. I didn't explain the family drama. I kept it professional. I kept it efficient. Subject: cancellation of services. Merriweather event. January 26th. I looked at the cursor blinking. Once I sent this, there was no going back. This wouldn't just ruin a party. It would humiliate them on a scale they couldn't even comprehend. It would strip them naked in front of the very people they were trying to impress. It would destroy Lucas's big break. I thought about my father's voice, weak and dismissive. I thought about my mother's accusation of manipulation. I thought about Preston laughing with his new wife, drinking the wine I bought. At the venue I secured, I started typing, "To whom it may concern." Due to unforeseen circumstances, I am formally canceling all services for the event scheduled for this Saturday. Please process the cancellation immediately as per the terms of our agreement. I copied the text. I pasted it into 20 separate emails. Addressing each vendor individually, I took a deep breath. I hit send all. The progress bar on the screen moved quickly, one by one. The emails whooshed away. The florist, gone. The band, gone. The caterer, gone. I sat back in my expensive ergonomic chair and watched the sent folder fill up. It was done. But as I looked at the spreadsheet again, my eyes drifted to the line item for the venue deposit. The $15,000 I had transferred to my father to pay the Grand Oak Manor. I frowned. That money was gone, non-refundable. But something about it nagged at me. My father had been so specific about me transferring it to him. Rather than paying the venue directly like I had with the florist, he said it was because he had a member referral discount that required the payment to come from a local account. I opened my banking app. I pulled up the transaction from 6 months ago. Transfer to Oaktree Ventures, LLC. Wait, I opened a new tab and typed the Grand Oak Manor corporate name into the search bar. The result came back Grand Oak Hospitality Group. Why did I send money to Oaktree Ventures? I clicked on the transaction details. The account number was local. I felt a different kind of coldness now. This wasn't just about a party anymore. I opened the Secretary of State's Business Registry database. I typed in Oaktree Ventures, LLC. The search wheel spun for a second before the results popped up. Entity name, Oaktree Ventures, LLC. Registered agent, Thomas Merriweather. Effective date, 6 months ago. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. My father didn't pay the venue deposit. He started a shell company with a name that sounded like the venue, had me transfer $15,000 to it, and pocketed the money. They weren't just using me, they were stealing from me. I looked at the emails I had just sent canceling the flowers and the food. That was just a tantrum. That was petty revenge. This was a felony. I leaned forward, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face. The tears I thought I might cry were gone, evaporated by the heat of a burning, righteous rage. "You want to ban me," I whispered, my fingers flying across the keyboard, opening a new spreadsheet. "Let's see what else you have been hiding." I didn't close my laptop. I poured myself that glass of wine now. It was going to be a long night. The undoing of a luxury event is far quieter than its creation. There is no fanfare, no popping of champagne corks, and no congratulatory handshakes. It is just a series of clicks, a few polite but firm emails, and the silent, digital disintegration of months of labor. I sat there in the cool glow of my monitor, my finger hovering over the mouse, feeling a strange, intoxicating power coursing through my veins. It was the power of destruction. For 29 years, I had been the builder, the fixer, the one who cemented the cracks in our family foundation with my own mortar. Now, I was holding the sledgehammer. I started with the catering company. It was a high-end outfit called the Gilded Palate, run by a temperamental French chef who had insisted that anything less than A5 Wagyu beef would be an insult to the palate. I opened the contract file. Clause 14. Section B stated that cancellations made within 72 hours would incur a 50% penalty, but cancellations due to documented family emergencies could be negotiated for a full credit toward future events. I did not want a credit. I wanted to scorch the earth. I drafted the email to the chef. I kept it brief. I wrote that a severe and sudden family crisis had occurred, which was technically true. Given that my family had just nuked our relationship and that the birthday celebration was indefinitely suspended, I did not ask for permission. I issued a notification. I watched the sent icon flash, and just like that, $4,000 worth of hors d'oeuvres vanished into the ether. Next was the florist. This was harder. Only because I genuinely liked the woman who ran the shop. She had spent weeks sourcing the specific sunset blush orchids my mother had demanded. But business is business, and my mother had made it very clear that I was merely a transaction to her. So, I severed the tie. I sent the same template email. Family emergency, cancel order, do not deliver, $5,000 saved. I moved down the list with the efficiency of a surgeon removing necrotic tissue. The jazz band, the lighting crew, the custom linen rental service, the valet company. One by one, I pulled the plug. My phone buzzed incessantly as the auto replies came in, followed by frantic text messages from vendors asking if everything was all right. I did not answer a single one. I let them go to voicemail. I needed the silence to focus. As the confirmations of cancellation rolled in, so did the refund notifications. My banking app chimed with the sweet sound of restitution. $2,000 from the bakery, $3,500 from the rental company. It was a reverse hemorrhage. The money that had been bleeding out of my accounts for months was rushing back in, filling the void where my affection for my parents used to be. But then I reached the line item that had given me pause earlier, the Grand Oak Manor. This was the big one, the $15,000 deposit for the venue itself, the crown jewel of the event. I knew that venue deposits were notoriously sticky, often completely non-refundable. However, I was a good negotiator, and I figured if I pleaded the family emergency case to the general manager, I might at least get 50% back, or at the very least, I could ensure that the venue would remain empty on Saturday night, a physical void to match the emotional one. I found the number for the Grand Oak Manor on their website, not from my father's contact list. I dialed, putting the phone on speaker as I leaned back in my chair, swirling the wine in my glass. Grand Oak Manor, Events Department. This is Sarah speaking, a cheerful voice chirped. Hi, Sarah. This is Isabel Merriweather, I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. I am calling regarding the Merriweather birthday celebration scheduled for this Saturday, January 26th. There was the sound of typing on the other end. Click, clack, click. Merriweather, Merriweather, Sarah murmured. The typing stopped, then started again, faster this time. I am sorry, ma'am. Did you say this Saturday? Yes, I said. Patricia Merriweather's 60th birthday party. It is in the main ballroom. The typing stopped completely. There was a long, confused pause. Ma'am, I am looking at our master calendar right now, Sarah said, her voice sounding perplexed. We do not have a booking for a Merriweather this Saturday. The main ballroom has been booked for the Southeast Regional Dentistry Conference for the past 8 months. They have the entire weekend blocked out. I froze. The glass of wine stopped halfway to my mouth. Are you sure? I asked, my voice dropping an octave. Maybe it is under a different name, Thomas Merriweather, or maybe it is in the garden pavilion instead of the ballroom. I am checking the entire property. Ma'am, Sarah said, sounding apologetic but firm. The garden pavilion is being used for the dentist's cocktail hour. We are fully at capacity. I have no record of a private birthday party for anyone named Merriweather, or any event of that size pending for this weekend. In fact, we have been sold out for this date since last May. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Okay, I said, trying to process the information through the roaring in my ears. Thank you. Sarah, I must have confused the dates. Thank you for checking. No problem at all. Have a good evening. I disconnected the call and stared at the phone. There was no party at the Grand Oak Manor. There never was. My mind raced, connecting the dots that I had been too blind, or perhaps too trusting, to see before. The $50,000 budget, the insistence that I transfer the venue deposit to my father instead of paying the vendor directly, the vague excuses about member discounts. I turned back to my laptop and pulled up my bank statements again. I drilled down into the transaction from 6 months ago. $15,000 sent to Oak Tree Ventures, LLC. I had found the LLC registration earlier, confirming my father was the agent. But now, the full picture of the grift came into sharp, horrifying focus. It wasn't just that he had routed the money through a shell company to pay the venue. It was that he had never paid the venue at all. He had taken my $15,000, deposited it into a dummy account that sounded like the venue, and simply kept it. But they had invited guests. They had sent out invitations. People were expecting a party. How are they planning to pull this off? I closed my eyes, thinking like a con artist, thinking like my parents. If you have 50 guests coming, including high-profile investors you're trying to impress, but you have stolen the venue money, where do you put them? You put them somewhere free. The backyard, I whispered to the empty room. It all made sense. They would claim there was a last-minute issue with the venue, a burst pipe, a fire code violation, some force majeure that was out of their control. They would play the victims. They would scramble and say, "Oh, it is a disaster, but we will host it at our lovely home instead. It will be intimate. It will be authentic." And they would pocket the $15,000. Wait, it was worse than that. I looked at the other expenses, the catering, the flowers, the band, those I had paid directly to the vendors. So the party services were real. They intended to have the high-end catering and the expensive jazz band show up at their house, while they kept the venue money for themselves. They were going to serve $50 a plate lobster in their living room, surrounded by my orchids, while sitting on a pile of stolen cash. And then, when I finally looked closer at the bank transfer details for the Oak Tree Ventures account, I noticed something else, the routing number. It wasn't a business account at a major bank. It was a checking account at a small local credit union. I logged into a background check service I used for vetting freelancers at work. I ran a search on Oak Tree Ventures. The company had no physical address other than a post office box. It had no business license for hospitality. It was a ghost, a wallet with a fancy name. My parents had not just banned me from a party. They had engaged in wire fraud. They had constructed a complex lie involving a fake venue booking to embezzle $15,000 from their own daughter, and the reason they didn't want me there. It wasn't just about Preston. It was because if I showed up, I might notice that we weren't at the Grand Oak Manor. I might ask questions. I might talk to the staff who wouldn't exist because they weren't at a hotel. By uninviting me, they weren't protecting my feelings. They were protecting their heist. A cold, hard knot of fury tightened in my stomach. This was beyond toxic family dynamics. This was criminal. They viewed me as a mark. I wasn't their child. I was the easy target in a long con. I looked at the clock. It was 8:30 in the evening. The party was in 3 days. I had a choice. I could call them right now. I could scream. I could threaten to call the police. I could demand my money back. But if I did that, they would spin it. They would cry. They would come up with some lie about saving the money for my future or investing it for the family. They would gaslight me until I doubted my own sanity. And worse, they would have 3 days to pivot. They would have 3 days to warn the guests, to come up with a plan B, to minimize the embarrassment. No, that was not how you dealt with people like this. You did not fire a warning shot. You waited until the enemy was in the open field, exposed and vulnerable, and then you dropped the hammer. I looked at the emails confirming the cancellations of the food, the flowers, and the music. The vendors knew the party was off. I knew the party was off. But Patricia and Thomas Merriweather, they had no idea. They were currently sitting in their house, probably toasting to their own cleverness, thinking they had successfully cut me out while keeping my resources. They believed the food truck was coming. They believed the band was tuning up. They believed the flowers were being cut. I decided then and there that I would not say a word. I would not send a text. I would not answer their calls. I wanted them to wake up on Saturday morning with high hopes. I wanted them to put on their tuxedos and gowns. I wanted them to open the door to greet the Hendersons and the shiny new daughter-in-law. I wanted them to stand there, smiling, waiting for the trucks to arrive. And I wanted them to wait, and wait, and wait. I wanted them to face a house full of hungry, bored, judgmental guests with absolutely nothing to feed them, no music to drown out the awkward silence, no flowers to hide the shabbiness of their living room. And when the panic set in, when my mother called the caterer screaming, she would learn that she wasn't the client, I was, and the client had canceled. I closed the laptop slowly. The screen went black, reflecting my face. I didn't look like the sad, desperate girl who had started the day. I looked like a CEO who had just executed a hostile takeover. I picked up my phone and blocked my parents' numbers. Then I blocked Lucas. Then I blocked the house landline. The silence in my apartment was deep and heavy. But it was no longer lonely. It was the quiet of a predator waiting in the tall grass. They wanted to play games with money. Fine. They were about to learn that while they might be playing checkers, I had been designing the chessboard the entire time. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like victory. The investigation was just beginning, but the trap was already sprung. Now, all I had to do was wait for the snap. The bottle of Pinot Noir was long empty. It sat on the edge of my desk like a tombstone marking the death of my naivety. The digital clock on my laptop read 3 a.m, but I was nowhere near sleep. My eyes were burning, dry and gritty, fixed on the glowing mosaic of spreadsheets that now covered my dual monitors. I had moved past the stage of a scorned daughter canceling a party. I had entered a cold, sterile room of forensic accounting, and what I was finding on the autopsy table was not just greed. It was a systematic dismantling of my financial existence. At Ethelgard Systems, my job often involved looking for patterns in chaotic data sets. We called it anomaly detection. You look for the outlier, the data point that drifts too far from the median, and you pull the thread until the whole sweater unravels. Tonight, the data set was my own life, and the anomalies were everywhere. I started with the car. Last year, for Father's Day, I had purchased a Lexus LS for my father. It was a certified pre-owned model. Sleek, black, and ostentatious, exactly the kind of vehicle Thomas Merriweather believed he was entitled to drive. I had paid the down payment of $12,000 and had committed to the monthly lease payments. But I had put the title in his name to simplify the insurance. It was a gesture of trust, a stupid, reckless gesture. I pulled up the folder labeled Dad, Car Expenses, every month, like clockwork. My father sent me an invoice for routine maintenance. He claimed the car was sensitive, that it required premium synthetic oil and specialized tuning because of the coastal salt air. I paid them all, $300 here, $400 there. I opened the most recent invoice, dated 2 weeks ago. It was from a shop called Coastal Elite Auto Care. The logo was pixelated, a low-resolution clip art image of a wrench crossed with a steering wheel. I had seen it a dozen times before and never looked twice. Now, I zoomed in. The address was listed as 429 Harbor View Lane, Suite B. I opened a new tab and typed the address into Google Maps. I switched to Street View. There was no mechanic shop at 429 Harbor View Lane. It was a strip mall nestled between a dry cleaner and a failing vape shop. Suite B was a pack-and-ship store, the kind where you can rent private mailboxes for $20 a month. My stomach turned over. I was not paying a mechanic. I was mailing checks to a box that my father, or perhaps Lucas, walked into, collected, and cashed. But that was not the worst part. I logged into the State Department of Motor Vehicles database. It is amazing what you can access when you know your father's social security number and date of birth by heart, because you have been filling out his tax forms for a decade. I punched in the vehicle identification number of the Lexus. The screen refreshed. Current status sold. Title transfer. Date October 14th. I stared at the date, October. That was 3 months ago. My father did not have the car. He had sold the Lexus 3 months ago, pocketed the cash, probably $20,000 or $30,000, and had continued to bill me for its maintenance every single month since. He was charging me to change the oil in a phantom vehicle. He was likely driving his old beat-up sedan, laughing every time my check for the Lexus arrived in his fake mailbox. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to put my head between my knees. This was not just taking advantage of a rich daughter. This was grifting. It was the kind of thing you read about in crime novels, not something your own father does to you. But if they lied about the venue, and they lied about the car, what else was a lie? My eyes drifted to the folder labeled The House. This was the emotional anchor of my family. The colonial revival on the edge of the historic district where I had grown up. The house where I learned to walk. Where I cried over my first breakup. Where I had hidden in my room while my parents fought about money downstairs. 5 years ago, They had told me they were drowning in the mortgage payments. They said the bank was threatening foreclosure. I had just received my first major bonus from Ethelgard. I wrote a check for $85,000 to clear the principal. I remembered the dinner we had that night. My mother had cried. My father had toasted to me. They said I had saved the family legacy. They said the house was finally ours, free and clear. I navigated to the county clerk's online portal. Public records are a terrifying thing if you have something to hide, and tonight, the Merriweathers had everything to hide. I searched for the property address. The deed history popped up. There was the record of the original mortgage from 30 years ago. There was the release of lien from 5 years ago when I paid it off. But there were more entries. Recent ones. Entry mortgage deed. Lender Shark River Capital. Date 2 years ago. Amount $150,000. My breath hitched. They had remortgaged the house. They had taken the equity I gave them and cashed it out. But why? Where did $150,000 go? Lucas's failed businesses, my mother's wardrobe, gambling. I scrolled down. There was another entry. Entry. Junior mortgage. Lender Quick Cash Holdings. Date, 6 months ago. Amount $75,000. They had taken a second loan on top of the first one. They were leveraging the house to the hilt. But it was the name on the filing that made the blood freeze in my veins. Grantor Thomas Merriweather, Patricia Merriweather, and Isabel Merriweather. My name was on the loan documents. No, I whispered, the sound harsh in the silent room. No, that is impossible. I had never signed a loan modification. I had never stepped foot in a bank with them for this, to be a co-signer on a mortgage. You have to be present. You have to show ID. You have to sign in blue ink in front of a notary public. I clicked the link to download the PDF of the scanned document. The file opened slowly, line by line, like a curtain rising on a horror show. I scrolled to the signature page. There they were, my father's jagged scrawl, my mother's looping, elegant script, and below them, on the line marked co-borrower, was a signature that read, Isabel Merriweather. It looked like my signature. It had the same slant. It had the same sharp I and the crossed T, but it wasn't mine. The tail of the R was too long. The pressure was too heavy. It was a tracing. Someone had taken a document I had signed, maybe a birthday card, maybe an old tax return, and practiced it until they could replicate it well enough to fool a tired loan officer. I looked at the notary stamp at the bottom of the page. The person who had verified that Isabel Merriweather was standing there, in the flesh, signing her financial life away. Notary Public Brenda Higgins. I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Brenda, my mother's bridge partner. The woman who came over every Tuesday to drink gin and tonics and complain about her ex-husband, Brenda, who had known me since I was 6 years old. My mother had not just forged my signature. She had recruited her friend to legalize the crime. I leaned back, the leather of my chair creaking. The reality of the situation crashed down on me with the weight of a collapsing building. This was not just about them stealing my cash. This was identity theft. They had attached my credit, my name, and my legal liability to a house that was drowning in debt. If they defaulted on these loans and given their spending habits, they absolutely would. The banks would not just take the house. They would come for me. They would garnish my wages at Ethelgard. They would seize my assets. They would destroy the credit score I had spent a decade building. I was not their daughter. I was their insurance policy. I was the host body they were slowly consuming to keep their parasite lifestyle alive. Fear, cold and sharp, replaced the anger. Anger is a hot emotion. It makes you want to fight. Fear makes you calculate. I realized I was in dangerous territory. If I confronted them now, if I called them screaming about the mortgage, they would destroy the evidence. They would claim I gave them verbal permission. Brenda would lie and say I was there. It would be my word against 3 people who had been lying for a living for 20 years. I needed more than a PDF. I needed hard, undeniable proof. I needed to trap them in their own web before I cut it down. I looked at the clock again. 4:15 in the morning. The city outside was still dark, but inside my head, the lights were blazing. I opened a new document on my computer. I named it the evidence log. Item 1, the fake venue deposit. Item 2, the fake car maintenance for the sold Lexus. Item 3, the fraudulent mortgage with the forged signature. It was a strong list, but it wasn't bulletproof yet. I needed them to admit it. I needed them to say it out loud. I needed a confession that no lawyer could wiggle out of. No crying mother could explain away to a jury. I remembered the email my mother had sent earlier, asking about the catering check. She was desperate. They were cash poor. They were living on credit and lies, waiting for my money to hit their account like a junkie waiting for a fix. That was their weakness. That was my leverage. I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. Black, strong enough to wake the dead. I stood by the window, looking out at the skyline of Charleston, somewhere out there, in the suburbs. My parents were sleeping in a house they had stolen from me, dreaming of a party that would never happen. I was done being the victim. I was done being the sad girl crying over a canceled birthday. I was Isabel Merriweather, and I was good at my job. My job was analyzing systems, finding the failure points, and correcting them. My family was a failed system, and I was about to initiate a total shutdown. I walked back to my desk, the ceramic mug warm in my hands. I picked up my phone. I didn't call them, not yet. I needed to let them sweat. I needed the desperation to build until they were willing to sign anything, agree to anything, just to keep the money flowing. I opened the folder for Oak Tree Ventures again. I looked at the routing number for the credit union. I had one more search to run. I needed to know if the IRS knew about this company, because if my father was hiding income in a shell company under my name and not paying taxes on it, I wasn't just on the hook for the mortgage, I was on the hook for tax evasion. I logged into the federal tax database using my own credentials. I searched for any K-1 forms or linked entities under my Social Security number. The wheel spun. No associated entities found. I exhaled. But it wasn't a sigh of relief. It was a confirmation of a different kind of horror. They hadn't registered the LLC with the IRS under my ID yet, which meant they were operating completely off the books, but the bank account for Oak Tree Ventures. I checked the bank statement I had downloaded earlier. The account holder name wasn't Thomas Merriweather, it was Isabel Merriweather. He had opened the bank account in my name. He must have stolen my passport or Social Security card during one of my visits. He was running a money laundering operation through an account that, legally, belonged to me. If the police found this before I did, I would go to prison. The room felt suddenly very small. The air felt thin. I wasn't hunting them anymore. I was racing them. I was racing against a clock I hadn't even known was ticking. I had to dismantle this, and I had to do it fast. But I couldn't just close the account. That would alert them. I needed to catch them in the act of using it. I needed to set a trap so enticing, so perfect, that they would walk right into it with a smile on their faces. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. A plan began to form. It was risky. It required me to play the role of the submissive, apologetic daughter one last time. It required me to look into the eyes of the people who raised me and lie better than they ever did. I could do that. After all, I had learned from the best. I minimized the browser windows, hiding the evidence of their crimes behind a screensaver of a peaceful mountain landscape. I needed to sleep for a few hours. I needed to look fresh. Tomorrow, no. Today was going to be the longest day of my life. I had to prepare for the birthday party that wasn't happening. And the legal war that was. I turned off the desk lamp. The darkness rushed back in. But it didn't scare me. I was the one in the dark now. They were the ones standing in the spotlight. They just didn't know the trapdoor was about to open beneath their feet. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp, clear weather that usually promises a perfect evening. The sky over Charleston was a bruising purple, fading into a star-speckled black. It was the sort of night made for champagne toasts on a terrace and the soft hum of a jazz quartet floating on the breeze. Instead, for the residents of the Merriweather household, It was about to become a live-streamed autopsy of their social standing. I was not in a ballroom. I was not wearing the emerald silk gown I had purchased months ago. I was sitting in my living room, wearing cashmere sweatpants and fuzzy socks, with a large pot of chamomile tea on the coffee table. On my 60-inch television screen, I had cast the feed from my parents' Ring doorbell camera. On my laptop, I had the interior nanny cam feed from the living room, a device I had installed 2 years ago when my mother claimed the housekeeper was stealing silverware. A claim that turned out to be false. Though I never took the camera down. It was 7 o'clock. The show was about to begin. The plan my parents had communicated to their guests was simple and elegant. Everyone was to meet at the Merriweather residence for a pre-departure cocktail, before a fleet of luxury limousines which I was supposed to have paid for would whisk them away to the Grand Oak Manor for the main event. It was a clever ruse. It allowed my parents to show off their house, manage the logistics of transport, and ensure everyone arrived at the venue together for a grand entrance. The only problem, of course, was that there were no limousines, there was no venue, and as of Tuesday night, there was no catering, no flowers, and no music. I took a sip of tea and watched the first car pull into the driveway. It was a Mercedes, the Hendersons. My heart gave a cold, hard thump against my ribs. Not from affection, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. The doors opened, and out stepped the VIPs, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson looked impeccable, dripping in old money confidence, and then, crawling out of the back seat like a stain on a silk sheet, came Preston. Seeing him again should have hurt. He was wearing a tuxedo that I knew cost $3,000 because I had helped him pick it out for a gala 2 years ago. On his arm was the new wife, the spinning instructor. She was wearing a dress that was too tight, too bright, and entirely inappropriate for a winter evening, but she clung to Preston's arm with a possessive claw that made me smirk. "Smile for the camera, Preston," I whispered to the empty room. My father opened the front door before they could even ring the bell. He was wearing his tuxedo, looking flushed and manic. My mother was behind him in a gold sequined gown that cost more than my first car. They were beaming. They were performing. "Welcome, welcome." I heard my father's voice, tinny and distorted, through the doorbell speaker. "The chariots are just a few minutes behind schedule. Come in, come in." They ushered the Hendersons inside. I switched my attention to the laptop screen showing the living room view. The house looked normal. That was the tragedy of it. There were no decorations. The florist had never delivered the $3,000 archway. The lighting crew had never set up the mood lighting. It was just their beige living room with the lights dimmed to hide the wear on the rug. My mother was already pivoting. I watched her gesture grandly to the empty sideboard. We decided to keep the pre-party simple, so we do not spoil our appetites for the lobster bisque at the manor. Just some water and light conversation while we wait for the drivers. The Hendersons looked confused. They exchanged glances. Rich people are used to being fed immediately. A lack of hors d'oeuvres is a sign of weakness. More guests arrived. The Parkers, the Williamsons, my Aunt Sarah. The only innocent person in this snake pit arrived in her sensible Sunday best. Looking uncomfortable, the living room began to fill up. There were about 40 people now, standing awkwardly in clusters, clutching their clutches. The air in the room was getting stale. I could practically smell the tension through the pixelated feed. It was 7:30. The limousines were 30 minutes late. I saw my father check his watch. He wiped sweat from his forehead. He whispered something to my mother. She kept her frozen, terrifying smile plastered on her face, but her eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. "Isabel must have gotten the time wrong," I heard her say to Mrs. Henderson, her voice pitching high. "You know how she is. Disorganized. I will just give the company a quick ring." She pulled out her phone and stepped into the hallway. Right under the view of the hallway camera, I turned up the volume. She dialed the number for Low Country Luxury Transport. I knew exactly what was happening on the other end. "Hello, yes. This is Patricia Merriweather," she hissed into the phone, her back turned to the party. "Where are the cars?" "You were supposed to be here at 7 o'clock sharp." Pause. What do you mean, canceled? Her voice rose to a shriek before she caught herself and lowered it to a strangled whisper. Who canceled it? Pause. The client. I am the client. No. Isabel is the... Oh, for heaven's sake. She hung up. She stood there for a moment, her chest heaving. She looked at the phone as if she wanted to throw it through the drywall. Then, she took a deep breath, composed her face into a mask of tragic victimhood, and walked back into the living room. Attention, everyone, she announced. Clapping her hands, the room went silent. I have some terrible news. It seems there has been a catastrophic mechanical failure with the transport service, a fleet-wide breakdown. Can you imagine the incompetence? A murmur of disbelief went through the crowd. Preston rolled his eyes openly. But, my mother continued, her voice trembling with manufactured optimism, we will not let this ruin the night we have this lovely home. And we have each other. I have just instructed the catering team to redirect the vans here. We will have an intimate, exclusive celebration right here. It will be like the salons of Paris. I laughed out loud. It was a magnificent lie. She was doubling down. She was betting everything on the idea that the food would show up and save her. Just give us an hour, she chirped. Please, make yourselves comfortable. The guests did not look comfortable. They looked annoyed. They sat on the sofas, on the armchairs, on the piano bench. The Hendersons were checking their watches. Preston was typing furiously on his phone, probably looking for a nearby bar. My father was running around pouring drinks from his personal liquor cabinet, which I knew was stocked with mid-range scotch, not the top-shelf vintage he had promised. So, Lucas said loudly. My brother was leaning against the mantelpiece, holding a beer. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a blazer over a t-shirt. Does this mean we have to wait for the food? I'm starving? Lucas, hush, my mother snapped. 8 o'clock passed. 8:30 passed. The mood in the room shifted from awkward to hostile. Stomachs were growling. The conversation had died down to hushed whispers. I saw Mrs. Henderson lean over to her husband and mouth the words, "This is ridiculous." My mother was in the kitchen now. I switched cameras, frantically calling the catering company. "What do you mean you are not coming?" she screamed. "I don't care who canceled it. We have 40 people here. We have the Hendersons. You need to bring food now. I will sue you. I will ruin you." She slammed the phone down on the counter. She opened the refrigerator. It was barren. A jar of pickles, some old yogurt, and a carton of milk. She opened the pantry, a box of stale crackers and some instant noodles. She started to cry. Not the pretty, delicate crying she used to manipulate my father. This was ugly, snotty, panicked crying. She grabbed her phone again and dialed my number. On my desk, my phone lit up. Mom calling. I let it ring. I took a bite of the expensive dark chocolate I had bought for myself. She called again, and again, and again. I blocked the number. She stared at her phone in disbelief. Then she wiped her face, grabbed a box of Ritz crackers, and arranged them on a silver platter. She marched back out to the living room. "The catering van is stuck in traffic," she lied, her voice cracking. "There was an accident on the bridge. But look, appetizers." She placed the crackers on the coffee table. It was pathetic. It was insultingly pathetic. Preston stood up. He picked up a cracker, looked at it, and dropped it back on the plate. "Patricia," he said, his voice dripping with the disdain I had once feared but now savored. "Is this a joke? We were promised a gala. We were promised a jazz band. We were promised dinner. It is coming," my father insisted, though he looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Technical difficulties, you know how it is. And then, Lucas, my dear, stupid brother, decided to speak. The silence in the room was heavy enough to crush a diamond, and Lucas broke it with the grace of a sledgehammer. "I don't get it," Lucas said, looking around with genuine confusion. "Mom, you said Isabel sent the check. You said she wired the $15,000 for the deposit and paid the caterer in full. If she paid them, why aren't they here? Did you check the account?" The room went dead silent. My father's face turned a color I had never seen before, a mix of gray and purple. My mother froze, the box of crackers still in her hand. $15,000. Mister? Henderson asked, stepping forward. His voice was low and dangerous. Thomas, you told me you were comping this event because of your membership perks. You told me you didn't need a deposit. Well, it is complicated, my father stammered. Wait, Lucas continued, oblivious to the fact that he was digging his own grave. Yeah, Isabel sent the money to that company you guys made. Oak Tree something, the one with the P.O. box. I saw the statement on your desk. If the money is there, just pay them extra to come now. The gasp that went through the room was audible even through the microphone. Preston laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. Oak Tree Ventures, you created a shell company to skim money off your daughter. No, my mother shrieked. Lucas, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. I do, Lucas argued, defensive now. I saw it. You said that money was for the family rainy day fund, but we could use it for the party if we had to. Well, it is raining. Mom. It was over. The facade didn't just crack. It shattered into a million jagged pieces. Mrs. Henderson stood up. She smoothed her dress. She didn't look angry. She looked disgusted. She looked at my parents the way one looks at a cockroach in a high-end restaurant. Thomas, Mr. Henderson said, I think we are done here, and I think we are done discussing that investment for Lucas. I do not do business with people who steal from their own children. Wait, Jim. Please, my father begged, grabbing Mr. Henderson's sleeve. Mr. Henderson shook him off violently. Don't touch me, he snarled. The exodus began. It wasn't a slow trickle. It was a stampede. The guests grabbed their coats and practically ran for the door. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't thank the hosts. They just wanted to get away from the stench of failure and fraud. Preston paused at the door. He looked at my parents. Then he looked directly at the camera in the hallway, almost as if he knew I was watching. He shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips, and walked out. He didn't care about me, but he loved seeing them fall. Within 5 minutes, the house was empty. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. My father collapsed onto the sofa, burying his head in his hands. Lucas was eating the crackers, looking sullen. Way to go, Lucas, my father groaned. You just cost us everything. I was hungry, Lucas yelled. My mother stood in the center of the room. She was trembling. Her eyes scanned the room, wild and furious. She knew. She realized that the cancellations were too precise. The vendors hadn't just failed. They had been called off. She realized I hadn't just forgotten the party. I had executed it. She walked slowly toward the hallway. She looked up at the security camera mounted above the door. Her makeup was running, black streaks of mascara carving paths down her powdered cheeks. She looked like a vengeful spirit from a gothic horror novel. Isabel, she whispered. Then she screamed. I know you are watching, she shrieked, her face contorted with rage, spitting at the lens. You ungrateful, spiteful little witch, you did this. You humiliated us. After everything we did for you, you are a monster. You are dead to me. Do you hear me? You are dead. She grabbed a vase from the console table, a vase I had bought her for Mother's Day 3 years ago, and hurled it at the camera. The feed glitched. Static cut across the screen, and then the image froze on a crooked angle of the ceiling. I sat there in the quiet of my apartment. My tea was cold. I moved my mouse to the record button on the software interface. I clicked stop, then I clicked save as. I named the file Exhibit A, the confession. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt a profound sense of clarity. The party was destroyed. The social standing was incinerated. But the war wasn't over. They were wounded animals now. And wounded animals are dangerous. They would come after me. They would try to spin this. But they didn't know I had the recordings. And they didn't know that while they were screaming about a ruined party, I was preparing to take the roof over their heads. I closed the laptop. I went to the kitchen and finally poured that glass of wine. I toasted the empty air. Happy birthday, Mom, I said. Welcome to the real world. The sun rose on Sunday morning over Charleston with a cruel, cheerful brightness that felt entirely inappropriate for the carnage residing in my voicemail inbox. My phone, which I had silenced but not turned off, was vibrating across the coffee table with the rhythmic persistence of a dying insect. It had been buzzing for 12 hours straight. I sat on my sofa, wrapped in a blanket, watching the notifications stack up like planes circling a closed airport. There were 43 missed calls, 27 text messages, 11 emails. The senders were a rotating cast of 3: Patricia, Thomas, and Lucas. I did not listen to the voicemails. I did not need to hear the audio to know the script. I could read the preview transcripts that my phone generated automatically. Lucas, you are a psychopath. Do you know what you did? Preston was laughing at me. You owe me an apology and you owe me cash for the embarrassment. Mom, pick up the phone. I am going to call the police. You can't just leave us like this. The Hendersons will never speak to us again. Dad, Isabel, please, let's be reasonable. We can explain. Just answer. They were cycling through the stages of grief at record speed, but they seemed stuck permanently between anger and bargaining. They were playing the victim with Oscar-worthy commitment. In their narrative, they were the innocent parents whose loving gathering had been sabotaged by a vindictive, mentally unstable daughter. They had conveniently edited out the part where they embezzled $15,000, forged my signature on a mortgage, and sold a car that did not belong to them. I picked up the phone, but not to call them. I opened the settings menu and turned off the notifications completely. Then, I opened my laptop. It was time to initiate the blackout. For the past decade, I had been the invisible infrastructure of the Merriweather household. I was the silent engine that kept the lights on, the water running, and the internet flowing. I had set up all the utility accounts in my name because my father's credit was so poor that the electric company required a deposit he could not afford. I had added my mother as an authorized user on my credit cards because she didn't understand how to apply for her own. I had purchased the family health insurance plan through a private broker because my father didn't believe in the marketplace. I had built a comfortable cage for them, and they had mistaken the bars for gold. Now, I was going to show them what happens when the zookeeper walks away. I started with the internet and cable package. My parents subscribed to the premium tier every movie channel, every sports package, and the highest speed data available. It cost me $340 a month. I logged into the provider's website. I navigated to the Managed Services tab. I didn't just downgrade them. I selected Cancel Service. The website tried to stop me. It offered me discounts. It offered me a free month. I declined them all. When the final prompt asked for a reason, I typed financial insolvency of the resident. Click, within minutes. The modem in their living room would blink red. The television screen would go black. The Wi-Fi signal that Lucas used to play video games and my mother used to shop online would vanish. They were now cut off from the world. Next was the electricity. This was slightly more complex. I could not legally shut off the power instantly without notice, but I could remove myself as the financially responsible party. I filed a stop service order, effective immediately. I indicated that I had vacated the premises, which was true, in a spiritual sense, and that the current occupants were responsible for establishing a new account. Since my father had outstanding debts with the power company from 10 years ago, they would require a significant deposit to switch the lights back on in his name. A deposit he did not have. Until he paid it, they would be living by candlelight. I moved to the water company. Same procedure. Stop service. Then came the health insurance. This was the most expensive line item. I paid $1,800 a month for a platinum family plan that covered my parents. It was a ridiculous extravagance, but my mother was a hypochondriac who insisted on seeing specialists for every minor ache. I called the broker's automated line. I entered my policy number. I selected Terminate Policy. The voice on the other end warned me that a lapse in coverage could result in penalties. I didn't care. I confirmed the cancellation. As of midnight tonight, Patricia and Thomas Merriweather would be uninsured. If my mother wanted to fake a fainting spell to get attention, She would have to pay the emergency room bill herself. Finally, I tackled the credit card. I held an American Express Platinum card. My mother had a supplementary card with her name on it, linked to my account. She used it for groceries, which I had long suspected included bottles of gin and scratch-off lottery tickets. I logged into the banking portal. I looked at the pending charges from yesterday. Even after the party disaster, she had gone to a 24-hour pharmacy and spent $85 on cosmetics. The audacity was breathtaking. I clicked on her card icon. I selected Freeze Card. Then, for good measure, I reported it as lost or stolen and requested that no replacement be sent. I sat back and exhaled. It had taken me 45 minutes to dismantle the entire logistical support system of their lives. I calculated the savings in my head. Between the utilities, the insurance, the car payments I was stopping, and the credit card spending, I had just given myself a raise of nearly $4,000 a month. The silence from my end was absolute. I did not send a text saying, "I cut you off." I wanted them to discover it. I wanted Lucas to scream when his game lagged and died. I wanted my mother to stand at the checkout line at the grocery store, swipe her card, and see the cashier shake her head. I wanted my father to flip a light switch and realize that the power was gone. I spent the rest of Sunday cleaning my apartment. I scrubbed the floors. I organized my closet. I threw out every gift they had ever given me, mostly cheap trinkets and regifted items. I was purging my physical space just as I had purged my financial one. By Monday morning, the panic had set in. The tone of the messages changed. The angry screaming was gone, replaced by a frantic, high-pitched desperation. They had realized that this wasn't just a fight. This was a siege. Lucas, "Hey sis, the internet is down. I think you forgot to pay the bill. Can you fix it? ASAP. I have a tournament today. Mom. Isabel." My card was declined at Harris Teeter. It was so embarrassing. There were people watching. "You need to call the bank right now. There is a mistake." "Dad, the power company just called. They said the account is closed." "Isabel, what is going on? We have food in the freezer. It will spoil." I drank my coffee and archived the messages without replying. By Monday afternoon, they brought out the big guns. My mother sent an email. The subject line was simply, "Please read. Emergency." I opened it, curious to see which narrative arc she would choose. "Isabel, I know you are angry about the party. We handled it poorly. We are sorry. But you have taken this too far. You are punishing us for a mistake. Your father collapsed this morning. His blood pressure is through the roof. He has chest pains. We are terrified it is a heart attack. The stress you are causing him is killing him, literally killing him. We need the insurance card information. We need the power back on so I can run his nebulizer. Please, Isabel, do not be a murderer. Do not let your father die because of your pride. Call us. Love, Mom." I read the email twice. A younger version of me would have panicked. A younger version of me would have called an ambulance and rushed over. Checkbook in hand, ready to fix everything? But the new Isabel was a forensic accountant of emotions. I looked at the facts. If my father was having a heart attack, why were they emailing me? Why hadn't they called 911? I logged into the portal for the health insurance provider one last time before the cancellation processed fully. I checked the Claims and Authorizations tab. If they had gone to the hospital, or even an urgent care, there would be a record of an intake scan. Nothing. No claims. "You have 24 hours to send me the following: 1. Dad's full tax returns for the last 5 years. 2. The unredacted bank statements for the Oak Tree Ventures LLC account. 3. The mortgage documents you signed for the second and third loans on the house. If you provide these documents and I find no irregularities, I will consider resuming partial support. If you refuse, you are on your own. Do not email me again unless it is to attach these files. Isabel, I sent it. It was a trap. Of course, a beautiful, inescapable trap. If they sent the documents, they would be handing me the physical proof of their crimes. The tax returns would show they hadn't declared the income they stole. The bank statements would show the money laundering. The mortgage documents would show the forged signature. They would be incriminating themselves instantly. But if they refused, they were admitting that they had something to hide. They were admitting that their secrets were more valuable to them than electricity or water. The response came 10 minutes later. It was short, sharp, and dripping with indignation. Isabel, how dare you? Our finances are private. We are your parents, not your employees. We have a right to privacy. We will not be blackmailed by our own daughter. We will find another way. You will regret this. I smiled. Privacy, I said aloud, in the world of forensic accounting. Privacy, when asked for transparency, is another word for guilt. Innocent people do not starve in the dark to protect their bank statements. People who are hiding felonies do. They had just confirmed everything. They would rather live without power than let me see the Oak Tree Ventures account. That meant the money in there wasn't just my $15,000. It was likely much, much more, and the source of it was likely illegal. I picked up my phone. I wasn't calling my parents. I was calling a number I had found on a legal forum earlier that morning. Garrison and Associates, a gruff voice answered. Hello, I said. My name is Isabel Merriweather. I would like to retain your services. I need a private investigator who specializes in elder financial fraud and identity theft, and I need a recommendation for a shark of a lawyer. We can help with that, the voice said. What is the scale of the fraud? I looked at the black screen of my television, imagining the dark, silent house in the suburbs where my parents were currently sitting, realizing that their bluff had been called. I believe, I said, my voice steady, that it is total. The game of cat and mouse was over. The hunt had officially begun. I wasn't just cutting them off anymore. I was preparing to prosecute. The glow of the computer screen was the only source of light in my apartment. I had spent the last 48 hours existing in a state of hyper-focused paranoia, scouring legal forums and dark web data brokers for information on how to dismantle a financial identity. I had posted a hypothetical scenario on a popular legal advice board under the username Daughter of Deceit. I changed the names and the location, but I kept the financial specifics intact because I needed accurate advice on the mortgage fraud. Post-title parents forged my signature on a second mortgage. How do I prove it without going to jail for their other crimes involving my name? The replies had been a mix of horror and skepticism. People told me to get a lawyer immediately. People told me to freeze my credit. But one private message, received an hour ago, stood out. It had no subject line. It just said, Isabel, stop posting. They will find this. Meet me at the Waffle House on Highway 17. Come alone. Aunt Sarah. I stared at the screen. Aunt Sarah, my father's younger sister. The black sheep of the Merriweather family. I had not spoken to her properly in 5 years. Not since my parents banned her from Thanksgiving dinner for creating drama, which I later learned was code for asking my father why he hadn't paid her back the money he borrowed. She had been at the disaster of a party on Saturday, standing awkwardly in the corner in her beige coat, but she had slipped away before the screaming started. I grabbed my keys and my folder of evidence. The Waffle House was empty save for a truck driver eating eggs and a waitress who looked like she would rather be anywhere else. Sarah was sitting in a booth in the back, nursing a black coffee. She looked older than I remembered. Her face was lined with the kind of weariness that comes from being right when everyone else says you are crazy. I slid into the booth opposite her. You look tired, Izzy, she said. Her voice was rough, like sandpaper. I am tired, I said. How did you know it was me? Charleston is a small town, she said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. And the details in your post, the canceled party, the $15,000 deposit. That wasn't hypothetical. That was Saturday night. I saw the look on Thomas's face when Lucas opened his big mouth. I knew right then the house of cards was falling. Why are you here? Sarah, I asked. If Dad finds out you are talking to me, he will. He will what? Sarah cut me off with a bitter laugh. He already took everything I had. Isabel, there is nothing left for him to threaten me with. I am here because you are finally asking the right questions, but you are looking at the wrong crime. I frowned. What do you mean? They forged my signature on a mortgage? They stole the venue deposit. That is just the tip of the iceberg, Sarah said. She reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a manila envelope. It looked old. The corners were bent, and the paper was yellowing. She placed it on the sticky table between us. You need to look at the foundation. What is this? Do you remember when Grandma Merriweather died? Sarah asked. 6 years ago. Of course, I said. A pang of grief hit me. My grandmother had been the one soft place in my childhood. She smelled like lavender and old paper. She died of a stroke. Mom said she died penniless. They said she left nothing but debt from her medical bills. I paid for the funeral because Mom said the estate was bankrupt. Sarah shook her head slowly. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of pity and rage. That is the lie they told you, she said. That is the lie they told everyone. Mother didn't die in debt. Isabel. She died with a portfolio of blue-chip stocks and a life insurance policy worth $400,000. The air left my lungs. What? She knew Thomas was reckless, Sarah continued. She knew Patricia was greedy. 6 months before she died, she rewrote her will. She didn't trust them. She wanted the money to go to the one person in the family who actually had a brain and a heart. She pointed a finger at me. You? I stared at the envelope. Me. She left 75% of her estate to you. Sarah said, to be held in trust until you turned 30, or to be released early for the purchase of a home. I was supposed to be the executor, but, Sarah's voice cracked, but I was in the hospital getting my hip replacement when she passed. I was out of commission for 2 weeks. What did they do? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. They produced a power of attorney document, Sarah said, dated 3 days before she died. It gave Thomas full control over her assets. They liquidated everything before the will could even be probated. By the time I got out of the hospital and tried to file the original will, the accounts were empty. They told me the money went to medical expenses. They told me if I tried to fight them, they would sue me for elder abuse, claiming I was trying to steal from a confused old woman. I didn't have the money to fight them, so I kept the proof and I waited. She slid the envelope across the table. I opened it. Inside was a copy of a last will and testament, signed in shaky but clear handwriting. I, Eleanor Merriweather, being of sound mind, leave the bulk of my estate to my granddaughter, Isabel Merriweather. And underneath it was another document, a bank statement from my grandmother's account, dated 1 month before her death. Ending balance, $412,000. I felt sick, physically violent sick. They stole it, I said, my voice trembling. They stole my inheritance. They let me pay for the funeral of the woman who tried to make me rich, while they pocketed her life savings. They bought the boat with it, Sarah said flatly. The one they crashed 6 months later, and the trips to Europe, and the down payment on the Lexus you eventually bought for him. I closed my eyes. The betrayal was so vast it was hard to comprehend. It wasn't just greed. It was a systematic cannibalization of my future. They had looked at me, their 23-year-old daughter, and decided that they deserved my grandmother's love more than I did. But that is not why I called you here tonight, Sarah said. Her tone shifted. It became urgent, frightened. The inheritance is gone. Isabel, you can sue them for it, and you should, but right now, you have a bigger problem, a much bigger problem. What could be bigger than $500,000 in theft? You mentioned Oak Tree Ventures in your post, Sarah said. The shell company. Yeah, I said. The fake company Dad used to steal the party deposit. I found the bank account. It is at the credit union. Did you look at the articles of organization? Sarah asked. Did you look at the tax ID registration? I couldn't find a tax ID, I said. I checked the IRS database. It wasn't there. It is there, Sarah said grimly. It just isn't under Thomas's social security number. It is under yours. I froze. The diner noise faded into a dull buzz. What? I have a friend who works at the Secretary of State's office, Sarah said. When I saw your post, I asked her to pull the file. Oaktree Ventures isn't just a bank account. Isabel, it is a fully registered limited liability company. And the sole proprietor listed is Isabel Merriweather. The social security number on file is yours. The signature is yours forged, obviously. But to the government, that is your company. So, I asked, my heart hammering. So they used my name to open a business. I can prove I didn't do it. You don't understand. Sarah leaned in, lowering her voice to a whisper. Oaktree Ventures isn't just holding $15,000 from a party deposit. My friends saw the revenue declaration last year. That company processed over $200,000 in consulting fees. $200,000? I asked. Where would my father get $200,000? He didn't earn it, Sarah said. He is moving money. I don't know who for. Maybe his gambling buddies. Maybe some of those shady investors he is always meeting. But he is using a company registered in your name to cycle large amounts of untaxed cash. That is money laundering. Isabel, federal crime. And since the company is in your name, and the bank account is in your name, guess who the IRS is going to come for when they realize no taxes have been paid on that money? The room spun. Me, I whispered. You, Sarah confirmed. And since you are a financial executive at a tech company, a prosecutor will look at this and say, look, she has the skills. She knows how to hide money. She set up a shell company to wash cash for her father. You fit the profile perfectly. Thomas is just a bumbling old man in their eyes. You are the mastermind. I realized then that this wasn't a family dispute anymore. This wasn't a civil case. This was a setup. My parents hadn't just used me for money. They had built a trapdoor under my life. They had set me up as the fall guy for a felony they had been committing for months, maybe years. If Oaktree Ventures got audited, I wouldn't just lose my job. I would go to federal prison. Oh my God, I said. I put my head in my hands. I cut off their power. I cut off their money. I poked the bear. If they get desperate, if they think I'm going to expose them, they will throw you to the wolves, Sarah said. They will claim you set it all up. They will say, we didn't know Isabel handles all the finances. She made us sign things, and it will look plausible because you do handle all their finances. I looked up at Sarah. What do I do? You stop treating them like parents, Sarah said hard. You treat them like the criminals they are. You need to gather every scrap of paper, every email, every text message that proves you had no knowledge of this company, and you need to do it before the IRS knocks on your door. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her grip was strong. I will help you, she said. I have the will. That proves a pattern of fraud going back 6 years. It proves they have a history of forging documents and stealing from family. It establishes character. If we can link the forgery on the will to the forgery on the mortgage and the forgery on the LLC documents, we can build a case that you are the victim, not the perpetrator. Why? I asked. Why help me now? After all this time, Sarah looked down at her coffee. Because Eleanor loved you, and because I am tired of letting them win. They took my brother from me. They took my mother's legacy. I won't let them take your freedom. I looked at the woman sitting across from me. For years, I had believed my parents' narrative that Aunt Sarah was jealous and unstable. Now I saw her for what she was, a survivor. And for the first time in this entire nightmare, I didn't feel alone. I had an ally, a witness. Okay, I said. I took a deep breath, pushing down the panic and bringing up the cold, hard resolve that had gotten me to where I was in my career. We need to move fast. If that company is laundering money, we need to trace the source. If I can prove the money came from people I have never met, I can prove I wasn't involved. How do we do that? Sarah asked. I have the bank account number, I said. I have the routing number. And because the account is technically in my name, I can access the transaction history if I can answer the security questions. You know the security questions. It is my father, I said. A grim smile touching my lips. He is lazy. The answer to every security question he has ever set is either Patriots or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I pulled my laptop out of my bag right there on the Waffle House table. I connected to the spotty Wi-Fi. Let's see who my father is really working for, I said. I navigated to the credit union's website. I entered the username Oak Tree Ventures. I clicked Forgot Password. Security question. What is the name of your first pet? I typed Buster. That was the dog we had when I was 5. Password reset. Sent to recovery email. My heart sank. The recovery email would be my father's. Wait, I said. He set this up using my identity. Maybe. I typed in the email address I had used in high school, the one I hadn't checked in 10 years but kept active for junk mail. My father knew that address. He used to send me chain emails to it. I opened a new tab. I logged into my old Yahoo account. There it was. Password reset request. He hadn't just used my name. He had used my old email address to make it look even more authentic, counting on the fact that I never checked it. I clicked the link. I reset the password. I logged into the Oak Tree Ventures bank account. The screen filled with numbers. I scanned the deposits. $5,000 here, $10,000 there, all from generic names like consulting services or cash deposit. But then I saw the withdrawals. They weren't going to investors. They weren't going to gambling debts. Transfer to Lucas Merriweather. Transfer to Patricia Merriweather. Payment to Charleston Luxury Imports. Payment to the Diamond Vault. They weren't laundering money for a cartel. They were laundering money for themselves. They were taking out loans in my name, dozens of them. From predatory online lenders dumping the cash into this LLC and then spending it on jewelry, cars, and clothes, they were bankrupting a fictional version of me to feed their reality. They are churning loans, I said, pointing at the screen. Look. Speedy cash loan. Lend up. They take a loan in my name, deposit it here, spend it, and then take another loan to pay the interest on the first one. It is a Ponzi scheme, and I am the product. Sarah looked at the screen, her face pale. Isabel, the total debt. I looked at the bottom line. Current negative balance across linked credit lines. $350,000. If this collapsed, and it was about to, because I had cut off the flow of new money, debt collectors wouldn't just call, they would sue. And because it was all in my name, they would sue me. I need a lawyer, I said, slamming the laptop shut. Not tomorrow. Tonight. I know a guy, Sarah said. He isn't fancy. He works out of a strip mall in North Charleston, but he hates fraudsters more than he likes money. Let's go. We stood up together. The rain was lashing against the windows now. The storm was here, but for the first time, I wasn't standing in it without an umbrella. I had the truth, I had the will, and I had Aunt Sarah. My parents thought they were playing chess. They didn't realize they had just knocked over the king. The office of Elias Vance was not where one went to find comfort. It was where one went to find a weapon. Located in a strip mall between a bail bondsman and a discount mattress store, the room smelled of stale coffee and aggressive litigation. Vance himself was a man who looked like he had been slept in wrinkled shirt. Tie loosened at the collar. Eyes sharp as broken glass behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He sat across from me, listening to the recording of Aunt Sarah and me at the Waffle House, his fingers drumming a frantic rhythm on his mahogany desk. "You have a problem, Ms. Merriweather," Vance said, his voice gravelly. He stopped the recording. "You have established motive. You have established a pattern. But you have not established separation. To a federal prosecutor, Oak Tree Ventures looks like a partnership. You provide the credit rating. They provide the labor. You claim ignorance. They claim delegation. If I am the U.S. attorney, I indict all 4 of you and let the jury sort out the bodies." I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't sign those papers. Elias, I was not there. I believe you, he said, leaning forward. But the law does not operate on belief. It operates on evidence. You need them to admit, on the record, that you are a straw man. You need them to say, explicitly, that they control the accounts, that they forged the signatures, and that you have zero access to the funds. You need a confession. They won't just give me one, I said. They are liars, but they are not stupid. Everyone is stupid when they are greedy, Vance countered. And right now, they are desperate. You cut their power. You cut their credit. They are bleeding. If you offer them a tourniquet, they will let you put the handcuffs on them yourself, as long as you promise to stop the bleeding. He slid a digital voice recorder across the desk. It was small, black, and terrifying. You are going to call them, he instructed. You are going to apologize. You are going to tell them you had a breakdown, that you were stressed, and that you want to make it right. You are going to offer them money, a lot of it, enough to make them forget caution. $50,000, I said. It was the number that started this. It seemed fitting it would be the number to end it. $50,000, Vance agreed. But there is a catch. You tell them you need to understand the business structure before you transfer the funds. You tell them you want to be a silent partner. You get them on a video call. I will be sitting right here, off camera. We record everything. If they take the bait, we walk this drive to the FBI field office tonight. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, but my mind was cold. I picked up my phone. I unblocked my mother's number. I dialed. It rang once, twice. Isabel. My mother's voice was frantic, breathless. Isabel, thank God the house is freezing. Your father is lying here in the dark. How could you be so cruel? I am sorry. Mom, I said, forcing a tremor into my voice. I squeezed my eyes shut, channeling every ounce of pain they had caused me, but twisting it into submission. I am so sorry. I had a panic attack. The stress of the wedding stuff with Preston, and work I just snapped. I didn't mean to hurt you. There was a pause. I could hear her calculating. Well, she said, her voice softening into that familiar, condescending maternal tone. We were very worried about your mental state. Sweetie, it was not normal behavior, but we are family. We forgive you. I want to fix it, I said. I want to send you the money, for the party inconvenience, and for Dad's health. I have a bonus coming in, $50,000. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. 50,000, she repeated. That would certainly help smooth things over with the neighbors, and the medical bills. I can wire it today, I said. But I need to do it as a business investment. For tax purposes, I want to put it into Oak Tree Ventures. Since you guys are already set up there, it makes sense, right? Yes, she answered too quickly. Yes, exactly. That is very smart. Isabel, very professional. But I need to go over the details first, I said. I need to understand how you guys are running it so I don't mess up my own taxes. Can we do a Zoom call in 10 minutes? We have no Wi-Fi, she snapped, because someone cut the cable. Use your cellular data, I said. Please. Mom, I have the transfer page open. I just need 10 minutes to feel comfortable, and then I will hit send. Okay, she said. 10 minutes. I hung up. I looked at Vance. He gave me a thumbs up. He opened his laptop and launched the recording software. He positioned the external microphone. He signaled for me to sit in the chair with the best lighting. While he retreated into the shadows of the room, invisible to the camera lens but hearing everything. 10 minutes later, my laptop screen flickered to life. The image was grainy. My parents were sitting at their kitchen table, illuminated by the harsh white light of an LED lantern. They were wearing heavy coats inside the house. My father looked pale but alert. Lucas was lurking in the background, wearing a hoodie. Hi, I said, wiping away a fake tear. I am really sorry. Guys, we are just glad you came to your senses, my father said, trying to look authoritative despite the fact that he was shivering. We were about to call the police to file a missing person report. We thought you had a breakdown. I did, I lied. But I am better now. I just want to help. So, my mother said, leaning into the camera. Her eyes were hungry. The $50,000, you said you have it ready. It is queued up, I said. I just need to ask a few things about Oak Tree Ventures. Aunt Sarah said something that scared me. She said the company is in my name. Is that true? My father waved his hand dismissively. It is just a formality. Isabel, we needed a clean credit profile to get the favorable interest rates on the startup loans. You know my credit took a hit after the recession. We did it to protect the family assets. But, I pressed, keeping my voice small and confused, if it is in my name, do I have to manage it because I don't have the passwords? I don't have the bank tokens. If the IRS audits me, I won't know what to show them. You don't have to do anything, Lucas chimed in. Stepping forward, he looked proud of himself. I handle all the tech. I set up the two-factor authentication on my burner phone. You can't even log in without me. That is the beauty of it. You are the owner on paper, but we are the operators. Total insulation. Vance scribbled something on his notepad. Admission of control. Okay, I said. So you guys have the banking login, you have the checkbook. I have the checkbook right here, my mother said, patting her purse. And your father has the debit card. We handle the day-to-day. You just provide the credibility. But the signatures, I said. The formation documents, the bank account opening papers. I didn't sign those. If the bank sees that. Isabel, please. My father sighed, as if explaining physics to a toddler. I signed them for you. I have been signing your name since you were in kindergarten. It is practically my signature, too. We have a power of attorney, remember? I don't remember signing a power of attorney, I said. Well, you were very busy at work, my mother interjected smoothly. We didn't want to bother you with the paperwork. Brenda notarized it for us. It is all legal. You don't need to worry your pretty little head about the bureaucracy. Vance's eyes widened. Admission of forgery. Admission of notary fraud. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I had them. But I needed one more thing. I needed to nail the coffin shut so tight that not even a crowbar could pry it open. I am just scared of the taxes, I said. $75,000 went through that account last month. If we don't declare it. We are not going to declare it, my mother whispered, leaning closer to the phone, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. That is the whole point of the LLC structure. Isabel, expenses offset income. We write off the car, the house, the dinners. It shows zero profit, zero tax. Is that legal? I asked. My mother laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. Legal is a flexible word, darling. It is exactly what we did with your grandmother's estate. Do you think we paid 40% inheritance tax on that $400,000? Of course not. We moved it. We gifted it. We spent it before the estate even closed. The government didn't get a dime, and neither will they with Oak Tree Ventures. You just transfer that $50,000, and we will make it disappear like magic. You will see. I froze. My heart stopped beating for a second. She had just confessed to the grandmother theft and the current tax evasion in the same breath. She was bragging about it. She was so confident in her manipulation of me, so sure that I was the same gullible daughter, that she was handing me the keys to her own prison cell. Vance looked at me. He made a cutting motion across his throat. Enough. We have it. I looked at the screen. I looked at the people who had raised me. They looked so small, so petty. They weren't masterminds. They were just grifters who had gotten away with it for too long because I had allowed it. Isabel, my father asked, the money my phone battery is dying. I am not sending the money, Dad, I said. My voice changed. The tremor was gone. The confusion was gone. It was the voice of the woman who had canceled the party. What? My mother asked, blinking. I said I am not sending the money, I repeated, and I am not investing in Oak Tree Ventures. I just needed you to confirm that you are the ones running it. What are you talking about? Lucas said, his tone turning aggressive. You promised Mom. She is doing it again. I am recording this call, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. I have a lawyer sitting next to me, I continued, speaking clearly and slowly. We have recorded everything. The admission that you forged my signature. The admission that Lucas holds the passwords. The admission that you stole Grandma's inheritance. And the admission of tax evasion. You little bitch, my mother hissed. Her face went from confused to demonic in a split second. You wouldn't dare. That company is in your name if we go down. You go down. No, I said, because I just got you on tape admitting that I have no access, no control, and no knowledge of the operations. I am not the partner. Mom, I am the victim, and this recording is going to the FBI, the IRS, and the local police in about 10 minutes. Isabel, wait, my father shouted, standing up. Don't do this. We are your parents. Then you should have treated me like a daughter instead of a credit card, I said. I didn't wait for their response. I clicked end meeting. The screen went black. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark monitor. My hands were trembling violently now. The adrenaline crash hitting me all at once. I felt like I was going to throw up. Vance stood up. He walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. You did good, kid, he said softly. That was cold, but it was necessary. He stopped the recording. He pulled the small memory card out of the device and held it up. This is your life, he said. Right here. This little piece of plastic is the difference between freedom and a federal indictment. What happens now? I asked. Now, Vance said, walking back to his desk and picking up the landline phone. We make some calls. I am going to call the fraud department at the credit union and issue an emergency freeze on all accounts linked to your Social Security number, citing identity theft with evidence. Then, we are going to package this recording with the affidavit we drafted and send it to the Economic Crimes Division. Will they be arrested? With the amount of money involved and the admission of wire fraud. Vance nodded. They won't be sleeping in that house tonight. Or if they are, there will be a patrol car parked outside. I watched him dial. I heard him identify himself as my counsel. I heard him use words like felony forgery, embezzlement, and immediate freeze. I walked to the window of his office. Outside, the world was moving on. Cars were driving by. People were going to dinner. They had no idea that in this small, dirty office, a family had just been executed. I took out my phone. I opened my banking app. I had $50,000 sitting in my savings account. It was safe. It was mine. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about the $400,000 they had stolen from her from me. I would never get that money back. It was gone. Spent on boats and cars and lies. But I had something else now. I had the truth. And for the first time in my life, the truth wasn't something they could twist, or hide, or gaslight away. It was digital. It was recorded. And it was bulletproof. It is done, Vance said, hanging up the phone. The accounts are frozen. The credit union is flagging Oak Tree Ventures for money laundering review. Your parents can't withdraw a dime. Even if they had power, they couldn't buy a loaf of bread right now. Thank you, Elias, I said. Don't thank me yet, he said, putting on his coat. The police are next. You ready to go make a statement? I buttoned my coat. I checked my reflection in the window. I looked tired. I looked older. But I looked free. Yes, I said. I am ready. We walked out into the cool night air. I didn't look back. The trap was sprung, the cage was closed, and I was the one holding the key. 3 days after I handed the digital recording to the authorities, the hammer finally dropped. It did not fall quietly. It fell with the screaming sirens of a multi-agency raid that shattered the quiet, manicured peace of the suburbs. I was not there to see it. I had no interest in being a spectator to the carnage I had engineered. However, in a neighborhood like my parents', privacy is an illusion, and gossip travels faster than fiber optic internet. My former neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a woman who had spent 20 years peering through her blinds at the Merriweather household, provided me with a play-by-play account that was so vivid I could practically smell the desperation. According to Mrs. Gable, my parents had attempted one final pathetic maneuver to save face. Despite the lack of electricity, which they were evidently disguising as a stylistic choice for ambiance, and the looming financial ruin, they had invited a small group of neighbors over for a garden wine social. It was a desperate bid to prove that the disaster of the birthday party was merely a misunderstanding, a hiccup in their otherwise golden existence. They were trying to normalize the abnormal. They were standing on the deck of the Titanic, rearranging the deck chairs while the water lapped at their ankles. It was 6 p.m. on a Wednesday. My father was reportedly wearing his smoking jacket, holding a glass of lukewarm wine, holding court about a misunderstanding with the banking software that had caused the recent hiccups. My mother was laughing too loudly at jokes that were not funny. Then, the convoy arrived. It was not just a patrol car, it was a procession. 2 local police cruisers, an unmarked sedan that screamed federal authority, and a van from the Forensic Accounting Division. They did not park politely at the curb. They pulled into the driveway, blocking my father's car and the path to the street. Mrs. Gable told me the silence that fell over the neighborhood was absolute. The neighbors who were sipping wine in the backyard froze. My father dropped his glass. It shattered on the patio, the sound sharp and final. The officers did not knock. They swarmed. They presented a search warrant that was comprehensive and devastating. They were looking for evidence of wire fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. They were looking for the physical manifestations of Oak Tree Ventures. The humiliation was public and total. The neighbors were asked to leave the premises immediately. They filed out past the uniformed officers, casting backward glances at the couple they had envied for years. My parents were left standing in their candlelight, stripped of their audience, facing the cold reality of the law. I sat in Elias Vance's office across town while this was happening, reviewing the timeline on a whiteboard. "They are inside now," Vance said, checking his phone. He had a contact in the district attorney's office. "They are securing the electronics." The raid was brutal in its efficiency. They seized everything. They took the laptop my mother used to manage her empire. They took the desktop computer from the study where my father printed his fake invoices. They took boxes of financial records that my parents had arrogantly kept in the house, believing they were untouchable. But the centerpiece of the raid, the moment that truly marked the end of the Merriweather dynasty, happened in Lucas's bedroom. My brother, the tech genius, the golden child who could do no wrong, had made a fatal error born of laziness and arrogance. He hadn't destroyed the tools of his trade. When the police searched his room, they didn't just find video games and empty soda cans. Inside a shoebox in his closet, tucked under a pile of hoodies, they found the physical stamps used to forge the notary seals. They found a stack of blank checks printed with the routing numbers of the Oak Tree Ventures account. They found a notebook containing the passwords to my stolen digital identity. Lucas was not just a beneficiary of the fraud. He was the mechanic. Mrs. Gable described seeing Lucas being led out of the house 20 minutes later. He was not walking with the swagger of an entrepreneur. He was handcuffed, his head hung low, wearing sweatpants and a look of terrified confusion. An officer guided him into the back of a cruiser. My mother screamed. It was a primal sound, the sound of a woman watching her favorite creation being taken away to a cage. She tried to run after him, but a female officer held her back. Then, it was my parents' turn. They were not arrested on the spot that would come later, after the indictment, but they were detained for questioning. They were escorted into the separate police vehicles, not in cuffs yet, but clearly not free to leave. My father looked shrunken, like a balloon that had lost its air. My mother looked furious, her eyes darting around the crowd of neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalk. Looking for someone to blame, she looked for me, but I was not there. Later that night, Vance obtained the transcripts of the initial interviews. We sat in his office, drinking bad coffee, reading the dialogue of 2 people who had sworn to love each other until death do them part. Now tearing each other apart to save their own skins, it was the prisoner's dilemma, played out in real time. In interview room A, my father cracked first. He didn't protect his wife. He didn't protect his son. He crumbled. Investigator. Mr. Merriweather, we have records of $200,000 moving through this shell company. Where did the money come from? Thomas. It was Patricia. It was all her idea. She wanted the lifestyle. She wanted the parties. I just did what she told me. She said she had a system. I didn't know it was illegal. She told me Isabel was okay with it. Then came the revelation I hadn't expected. Investigator, and the withdrawals. $50,000 in cash withdrawals at the casino in Cherokee. Thomas, I have a problem, a sickness. Patricia told me if I helped her set up the loans, I could use some of the float to win it back. I was going to pay it back, I just needed a lucky streak. She knew. She encouraged it, so I would sign the papers. I stared at the paper. My father was a gambling addict. The business trips he took. The missing money from my childhood. It wasn't just bad investments. He had been gambling away our livelihood for decades, and my mother had used his addiction to control him, feeding him chips in exchange for his complicity in her fraud. In interview room B, my mother was painting a different picture. Patricia. My husband is a sick man. He has threatened me. He forced me to sign those things. He said if I didn't help him get money for his debts, the loan sharks would come for the house. I did it to protect the family. I am a victim here. Isabel refused to help us, so Thomas made me do this. Investigator. So you admit to forging your daughter's signature, Patricia. I admit I did what I had to do to survive a tyrant, and my ungrateful daughter has plenty of money. She wouldn't even miss it. Is it really stealing if it is in the family? She owes us. We raised her. They were rats. Vicious. Cornered rats, eating each other to survive the rising water. During the interrogation, the log showed they both asked for their one phone call. They both dialed the same number. Mine. I looked at my phone. Sitting silently on the desk, the block list was doing its job. They were calling the person they had robbed, hoping I would swoop in with my checkbook and my connections to bail them out one last time. They wanted the victim to save the predators. They are done, Vance said, tossing the file onto his desk. With these statements, plus your recording, plus the physical evidence in Lucas's room, the DA is going to go for the throat. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Aggravated identity theft. Money laundering. What about me? I asked. Am I clear? Vance slid a document toward me. It was thick, bound in heavy paper. Affidavit of non-involvement and cooperation agreement. This is your shield, Vance said. By signing this, and by providing the state with the evidence against them, you are formally recognized as a victim witness. You are immune from prosecution regarding the Oak Tree Ventures entity. Provided you testify truthfully, the IRS has already flagged your file as identity theft victim rather than suspect. You are safe. Isabel. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. I signed my name. It was the same signature my mother had practiced forging 1,000 times. But this time, the ink carried the weight of the truth. There is one more thing, Vance said. He pulled out a second document. The civil filings. This was the lawsuit. Isabel Merriweather versus Thomas Merriweather, Patricia Merriweather, and the estate of Eleanor Merriweather. I was suing them for the return of the stolen inheritance. I was suing for the fraud on the house. I was suing for emotional damages. We are also serving the bank with a notice of fraud regarding the mortgages, Vance explained. Once the bank realizes the signatures on the second and third mortgages are forged, they will declare the loans in default immediately. They don't wait for the criminal trial. They invoke the acceleration clause. Which means the house is being foreclosed on, Vance said. As of this morning, the foreclosure process has been triggered. The bank will move to seize the property to recoup their losses. Since your parents have no equity left, they stole it all, they will be evicted. I thought about the house, the colonial revival with the wraparound porch, the place where I had learned to walk, the place where I had spent years trying to be good enough. It was the stage where they had performed their play of the happy family for 30 years. Let it burn, I said softly. Excuse me. Take the house, I said, looking Vance in the eye. Take it all. They use that house as collateral to destroy my credit. It is not a home. It is a crime scene. Vance nodded. I will file the papers in the morning. I left his office an hour later. The night was cool and dark. I walked to my car, expecting to feel a surge of triumph. I expected to feel the rush of victory that comes at the end of a revenge movie. Instead, I felt a vast, echoing hollowness. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. My parents were in a holding cell, or perhaps released on a bail they couldn't afford, returning to a dark house that was no longer theirs. My brother was in the system, his future stamped with a felony record. The neighbors were feasting on the carcass of our reputation. I had won. I had protected myself. I had stopped the bleeding. But the cost was absolute. I was an orphan now, not by death, but by necessity. I had surgically removed my family to save my life, and while the operation was a success, the phantom pain was already setting in. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up, bright and functional. I had work tomorrow. I had a life to live. I had bills to pay, my own bills, for my own life. I put the car in drive and pulled out of the lot. I didn't look at the rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me worth looking at anymore. The storm had made landfall. The damage was done. And now, all that was left was to sweep away the debris and keep moving. The conference room at the mediation center smelled of lemon polish and impending ruin. It was a sterile environment, all glass walls and uncomfortable ergonomic chairs, designed to strip away the emotion from the dismantling of a life. I sat on one side of the long mahogany table, flanked by Elias Vance and a court-appointed mediator. On the other side sat the remnants of the Merriweather dynasty. When the door opened and my parents walked in, accompanied by a public defender who looked like he had not slept in a week, I felt a jolt of shock. It had been less than 2 weeks since the raid, but they had aged 10 years. My father, Thomas, usually impeccable in his tailored suits, was wearing a cardigan that hung loosely on his frame. His hands shook with a visible tremor, the withdrawal from his gambling addiction likely mixing with the terror of his legal reality. My mother, Patricia, the Iron Lady of Charleston society, looked small. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, no longer dyed to hide the gray roots that were beginning to show. Her eyes, usually sharp with calculation, were dull and rimmed with red. They did not look at me. They looked at the table. They looked at the floor. They looked anywhere but at the daughter they had tried to erase. We were here to finalize the global settlement agreement. It was a fancy legal term for a surrender, to avoid a long, public federal trial that would almost certainly end in significant prison time for money laundering and aggravated identity theft. They had agreed to a plea deal. They would plead guilty to lesser charges of fraud and forgery. In exchange, they would avoid a 10-year sentence in a federal penitentiary, trading it for strict probation, house arrest, and most importantly, for me, full civil restitution. "Let us begin," the mediator said, opening a thick file. "The terms have been drafted. We are here to execute the transfer of assets and finalize the admission of liability." My father reached for a glass of water. He knocked it over. The water spread across the table, soaking the edge of the documents. He stared at it, paralyzed. "I will get it," he whispered, dabbing at it with his sleeve. It was a pathetic gesture. The man who used to order waiters around with a snap of his fingers was now cleaning up spilled water with his own clothes. "Leave it, Thomas," my mother snapped. Though her voice lacked its usual venom, it sounded brittle. Vance slid a stack of papers across the table. "This is the quitclaim deed for the house," Vance said. "You are signing over all rights to the property to the bank to expedite the foreclosure process. This satisfies the primary lien. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." My mother flinched. 30 days. But where will we go? We have lived there for 30 years, all our memories. "Your memories are not collateral," Vance said coldly. "You used that house to secure 3 fraudulent loans. It belongs to the bank. Frankly, 30 days is a courtesy." My mother looked up then. and her eyes finally locked onto mine. For a moment, I saw a flash of the old Patricia, the manipulator, the woman who believed she could talk her way out of a firing squad. "Isabel," she said. Her voice wavered, trembling with a curated sadness. "Isabel, please, look at us. We are your parents. Do you really want to see us on the street? We made mistakes. Yes, we did terrible things with the paperwork, but we did it for the family. We did it for the future, for you and Lucas. We wanted you to have the status you deserved. We wanted to keep the Merriweather name strong so you could marry well, so you could be happy." She reached a hand across the table, palm up, begging. "I did it because I love you," she whispered. "A mother does what she has to do to keep her children afloat. I took the burden of the finances so you wouldn't have to worry. I tried to give you a beautiful life. Does that make me a criminal, or does it make me a mother who loved too much?" The room went silent. The public defender looked down at his legal pad, clearly uncomfortable. It was a good performance. If I were the girl I was 6 months ago, it might have worked. I might have felt that familiar tug of guilt, the ingrained belief that I owed them my survival. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was the woman who had seen the bank statements. I was the woman who had seen the text messages where they laughed about spending my money. I leaned forward. I did not raise my voice. I spoke with the flat, calm precision of a judge delivering a death sentence. "Stop," I said. My mother froze. "Do not use that word," I continued. "Love, you do not know what it means. You didn't steal $400,000 from Grandma's estate for me. You spent it on a boat. You spent it on trips to Italy where you left me at home. You didn't forge my signature on a mortgage to secure my future. You did it to pay off Dad's gambling debts so he wouldn't get his legs broken by a loan shark." "Isabel," my father started. A weak protest. "And the birthday party," I cut him off, my eyes fixed on my mother. "You didn't ban me from the party because you were worried about my feelings regarding Preston. That is the biggest lie of all. You banned me because you were ashamed of me. You banned me because in a room full of people you were trying to impress with your fake wealth. I was the only real thing. I was the wallet. I was the walking, talking reminder that you are failures." My mother recoiled as if I had slapped her. "You hate me," I said, realizing it was true as I said it. "You hate me because I'm successful without lying. You hate me because I work for my money. And you banned me because you knew that if I showed up and saw the cheap food and the backyard setup, I would see through you. You didn't want to protect me. You wanted to blind me." My mother's mouth opened and closed. She had no script for this. She had no defense against the truth. "Sign the papers," I said. "Sign them, or I walk out of here. I withdraw the cooperation agreement, and I testify at a sentencing hearing where I will ask the judge to give you the maximum 20 years. The silence stretched for a long, agonizing minute. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. Then, slowly, my father picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he had to steady it with his other hand. He signed, "Thomas Merriweather." He passed the pen to my mother. She looked at the document. She looked at the deed to the house she had defined herself by for 3 decades. A tear leaked out of her eye, cutting through the powder on her cheek. It wasn't a tear for me. It was a tear for the house. She signed, "Patricia Merriweather." "Good," Vance said, scooping up the documents. "Now, the assets." They signed over the title to the remaining car. They signed over the contents of the house to be auctioned, the furniture, the silver, the art. Everything that had been bought with stolen money was being liquidated to pay back the creditors. Starting with the bank and ending with me, I would recover pennies on the dollar. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the stripping away. "And Lucas?" I asked, looking at the public defender. "Your brother accepted a plea yesterday," the lawyer said quietly, "because of his cooperation in unlocking the encrypted files. He was granted leniency, 3 years of probation, 500 hours of community service. He is currently assigned to a roadside cleanup crew." I nodded. Lucas, the prince who thought he was too good to work, would spend the next 3 years picking up trash on the side of the interstate in an orange vest. It was poetic. "Where will they go?" I asked, gesturing to my parents. "We found a place," my father mumbled. "An apartment, in North Charleston, near the industrial park." I knew the area. It was a landscape of concrete, chain-link fences, and hourly motels. It was 40 miles and a universe away from the country club. "It is a one-bedroom," my mother whispered, her voice laced with horror. "We have to sleep on a pull-out couch." "It is what you can afford on Social Security," I said. "Which is the only honest money you have left." The meeting was over. Vance began packing up his briefcase. My parents stood up shakily. They looked at me one last time, perhaps hoping for a hug, a goodbye, some crack in the armor. I gave them nothing. I stayed seated, watching them shuffle toward the door. "Oh," I said, stopping them just as they reached the handle. "One last thing." They turned. "I know you are worried about what people will say," I said, "about the reputation of the family." My mother straightened up slightly. "We will weather this. We will tell people it was a misunderstanding. The family will stand by us." I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of envelopes. "I don't think they will," I said. "What is that?" my father asked. "These are copies of Grandma Eleanor's original will," I said. "And the bank statements showing you emptied her accounts before she was cold. And the affidavit from Aunt Sarah." My mother's face went white. "Isabel, no, that is private." "It was private," I corrected. "Until this morning, my lawyer just mailed these certified letters to every single member of the Merriweather family, Uncle Bob, Cousin Jenny, the great-aunts in Savannah, everyone." "You destroyed us," my mother gasped. "No," I said. "I just turned on the lights. You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure everyone could see the wreckage." My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She lunged for the door, desperate to get out, to run, to hide. My father followed her, looking like a man who had just seen his own ghost. The door clicked shut behind them. I sat there for a long time. The room was quiet. Vance looked at me. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I feel light." "That is the weight coming off," he said. "You carried them for a long time, Isabel." I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I picked up my bag. "Thank you, Elias," I said. "Send me the bill. I will pay it in full, today." I walked out of the mediation center. I took the elevator down to the lobby and pushed through the heavy glass doors. Outside, the sky had opened up. It was raining a soft, steady, cleansing rain that washed the dust off the pavement. Usually, I would have panicked. I would have worried about my hair, my shoes, my clothes. I would have scrambled for an umbrella. But today, I didn't care. I walked out from under the awning. The cool water hit my face. It soaked into my blouse. It ran down my neck. I tilted my head back and closed my eyes. For 29 years, I had been holding an umbrella over my parents, trying to keep them dry while I got soaked by their storms. I had shielded them from their debts, their lies, and their failures. I had let them stay warm while I shivered. Now, I was wet, but I was free. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the smell of wet asphalt and ozone. I heard the sound of the city cars honking, people talking, life moving on. I was part of it now. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a bank. I was just Isabel. And for the first time in my entire life, that was enough. I started walking down the street, the rain mixing with the tears I hadn't realized I was crying, washing it all away. I had one more thing to do, one final act to close the book, but for now, I just walked, letting the rain baptize me into my new life. Rain in Seattle is different from the rain in Charleston. In the South, the rain is violent. It comes in thick, warm sheets that drown the earth and scream against the tin roofs. It is angry rain. Here, in the Pacific Northwest, the rain is a constant, gray mist, It is quiet. It washes the world clean. Slowly, persistently, day after day. It was the perfect weather for a ghost, which is exactly what I had become. It had been 3 months since I walked out of that mediation room, 3 months since I signed the papers that stripped my parents of their home and their dignity. In that time, I had dismantled the life of Isabel Merriweather. I sold the condo with the exposed brick walls. I sold the German car. I resigned from Ethelgard Systems. Taking a severance package and a glowing recommendation, I packed my life into 4 suitcases and flew across the country to a city where no one knew my last name, and where the coffee was strong enough to keep the nightmares at bay. I was working now as a consultant for a cybersecurity firm. It was ironic work. I spent my days teaching corporations how to protect themselves from internal threats, how to spot the employee who was siphoning off funds, how to recognize the digital footprint of betrayal. I was very good at it. After all, I had learned from the masters. I thought I was done. I thought the legal judgment was the end of the story. I thought that by taking their house and forcing Lucas into community service, I had neutralized the threat. But a parasite does not die just because you cut off one food source. It simply looks for a new host. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was Aunt Sarah. We spoke once a week, usually brief check-ins where she assured me that she was fine, and I assured her that I was eating vegetables. But today, her voice was tight. "Isabel," she said, skipping the pleasantries, "they are at it again." I spun my chair around to look out the window at the gray skyline. "What do you mean, they are on probation? They are broke." "Broke people are the most dangerous kind," Sarah said. "I ran into Mildred at the market today. You know Mildred? Your father's second cousin in Savannah, the one with the bad hip and the pension." "I know her," I said, feeling a cold prickle on the back of my neck. "She is 80 years old." "Well," Sarah continued, her voice trembling with suppressed rage, "Mildred told me that Thomas called her yesterday. He gave her a sob story that would win an Academy Award. He told her that his wicked, estranged daughter, that is, you had stolen his identity, framed him for fraud, and thrown him out of his house. He said they were living in squalor because of your mental illness and vindictiveness." I gripped the phone tighter. "He is lying to an 80-year-old woman. It gets worse," Sarah said. "He told her that he has a surefire investment opportunity that can win it all back. He asked her for $5,000. He called it a bridge loan to help them get back on their feet, so they can hire a lawyer to sue you and clear their good name." I felt the blood rush to my face. It wasn't fear. It wasn't hurt. It was a pure, cold fury. They had not learned a single thing. They had lost their home, their reputation, and their children. And their first instinct was not repentance. It was to find a new victim. They were weaponizing their downfall to run a new grift. And they were using my name, painting me as the villain to do it. They were going to drain an elderly woman's pension just like they drained Grandma Eleanor's estate. "Did Mildred give them the money?" I asked. "She was thinking about it," Sarah said. "She felt sorry for them. I told her the truth. Of course, I told her everything. But Isabel, if they are calling Mildred, they are calling everyone. They are going through the Rolodex. They are looking for anyone who doesn't know the full story. They are trying to rewrite history," I said softly. "They are," Sarah agreed. "And as long as the court records are just dusty files in a basement, they might succeed. People love a victim story. Isabel, especially in the South." I hung up the phone. I sat in my sleek, minimalist office for a long time. I thought about the global settlement agreement. It silenced me from suing them again. But it did not silence me from telling the truth. The truth is an absolute defense. They wanted to play the victim. They wanted to claim I framed them. "Okay," I whispered to the rain. "Let's look at the evidence. I didn't need a lawyer for this. I needed a server." I spent the next 48 hours building a website. I bought a domain name that was innocuous but specific, something that would show up immediately if anyone Googled my parents' names. I used my skills to ensure it was anonymous, hosted on an offshore server that disregarded takedown requests. I called it the Charleston Grift, I didn't write a long, emotional diary entry. I didn't call them names. I simply uploaded the files. Exhibit A. The audio recording of the Zoom call where Patricia Merriweather admits to tax evasion and forgery. Exhibit B. The side-by-side comparison of my grandmother's will and the fraudulent power of attorney document. Exhibit C. The bank statements from Oak Tree Ventures, showing the money flowing from predatory loans into my father's casino visits and my mother's jewelry purchases. Exhibit D. The police report from the raid, redacted to protect the officers but clear enough to show the seizure of the forgery tools from Lucas's bedroom. I presented it as a case study in elder fraud and identity theft. I redacted my own name to just the daughter, but I left their names fully visible. They were public figures in their own minds. After all, then came the distribution. I didn't just post it and hope for traffic. I had their email lists. I had the contact list I had built for the birthday party. The one with every prominent socialite, business partner, and church deacon in Charleston. I drafted a single email. Subject: a warning regarding Thomas and Patricia Merriweather body. It has come to our attention that Thomas and Patricia Merriweather are currently soliciting funds from friends and family under false pretenses, claiming to be victims of familial fraud to prevent further financial victimization of the community. The following public records and verified recordings are being made available for review. Please protect your assets. I attached the link. I looked at the cursor hovering over the send button. This was it. This was the kill shot. The legal system had taken their money, but this would take their social currency. This would strip them of the ability to ever lie to these people again. It would make them radioactive. They would be isolated. They would be pariahs. They would walk into church and see people turning their backs. They would call old friends and go straight to voicemail. They had tried to ban me from a party to save their reputation. I was about to burn their reputation to the ground to save the community. I hit send. The emails flew out into the digital ether, 300 of them, to the pastor, to the Hendersons, to Great Aunt Mildred, to the Bridge Club. I sat back and exhaled. It was done. I didn't feel malicious. I felt like a surgeon who had just cut out a tumor to stop it from metastasizing to the rest of the body. 1 week later, Aunt Sarah sent me a package. I opened it on my desk. It was a simple manila envelope, but inside was a birthday card. My birthday wasn't for another month, but Sarah had never been good with dates. Isabel. The note read, "The church was very quiet on Sunday. Your parents walked in, sat in their usual pew, and within 2 minutes, the entire row stood up and moved to the other side of the sanctuary. The pastor sermonized on the sin of deceit. They left before the final hymn. I don't think they will be back. Also, Mildred says thank you." I smiled. It was a grim smile, but it was real. The quarantine was effective. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the rest of the contents. It was a photograph. It was old. The edges curled and yellowed. It was a picture I thought had been lost forever. One of the many things my parents claimed to have misplaced during the move. It was me, barely 2 years old, sitting on the lap of Grandma Eleanor. She was laughing, pointing at the camera, and I was looking up at her with wide, adoring eyes. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated love, captured in silver halide before the corruption of my parents could touch it. Sarah had saved it. She had pulled it out of a box my mother was throwing away years ago and kept it, waiting for the day I would need to remember that I came from love. Even if that love skipped a generation, I placed the photo in a silver frame on my desk. It looked right there, next to my dual monitors and my cup of Seattle coffee. It was my roots, not the rot, but the soil beneath it. My phone began to ring. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. The area code was 843. Charleston. It wasn't Sarah. It wasn't a lawyer. It was them. They had probably bought a burner phone, or borrowed one. Desperate to scream at me, they wanted to pour their poison into my ear one last time. They wanted to blame me for the silence in the church. They wanted to curse me for the website. They wanted to drag me back into the mud so they wouldn't be alone in the filth. I looked at the vibrating phone. I could answer it. I could tell them to go to hell. I could laugh at them. I could block the number, but blocking them required effort. Blocking them meant I acknowledged their existence. Blocking them meant I was afraid of what they had to say. I wasn't afraid, and I didn't care. I turned back to my computer. I had a report to finish for a client who was worried about a data breach. I had a dinner reservation with new friends at 7. I had a yoga class in the morning. I let the phone ring. It rang once, twice, 3 times. A desperate, electronic plea for attention from ghosts who didn't realize they were already dead. I typed a sentence. I took a sip of coffee. The ringing stopped. The screen went dark. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It wasn't empty. It was full. It was full of peace. It was full of the sound of the rain against the glass. It was full of the future. I looked at the photo of my grandmother one last time, winked at her, and went back to work. I had cut out the cancer. I had cauterized the wound. And now, finally, I was healing. They had tried to destroy me with their greed. They had tried to erase me with their lies. But in the end, all they had done was forge me into something unbreakable. They banned me from a birthday party, but in doing so, they gave me the greatest gift of all my own life. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal, justice, and the ultimate reclamation of self. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from the busy streets of New York, the quiet countryside of England, or perhaps somewhere in Asia? Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on Isabel's decision. Did she go too far with the website, or was it exactly what her parents deserved? If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the Sunday Drama Stories channel. Don't forget to like this video and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear that it is okay to walk away from toxic family. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next story.